There's a field in East Feliciana Parish, Louisiana, 60 acres, oak trees older than anyone in my family can remember, soil that has held rain and heat and grief and everything in between for nearly 100 years. My great-great-grandfather Ezekiel Arsenault bought that land in 1928, cash, in the American South as a black man. 1 year after the Great Mississippi Flood took everything from people who looked like him. Nobody told him he could do it. He did it anyway. I thought about that field last Tuesday morning when a lawyer from Charlotte, North Carolina called my office and told me he was representing my sister in a bankruptcy proceeding. He used the word urgent. He used it 3 times in under a minute. I thought about the last time I stood in that field the summer before Big Mama passed. Family reunion, 40 people, gumbo on the fire, and my sister Tracy standing up in her Saint Laurent and raising her glass and saying the words she'd been building up to her whole life. I will never need a single thing from Zuri, not one thing. And I mean that. People laughed. My mother nodded. Big Mama from her wheelchair at the edge of the yard did not laugh. She looked at me, just looked, with eyes that had been watching our family for 81 years and understood every single thing they saw. She passed away 6 months later. She left me the field. My name is Zuri Camille Arsenault. And this is the story of what it means to be the one nobody sees until the day you're the only one left standing. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop a comment below. Now let me take you back to where it all started. Let me tell you about the house I grew up in. Henriette DeLille Street, Treme neighborhood, New Orleans, Louisiana. A 2-story Creole shotgun house painted sage green with white shutters. The wood floors creaked in the same 3 spots for as long as I can remember, one at the bottom of the stairs, one just inside the kitchen door, one near the back window where Daddy liked to sit and read the paper on Sunday mornings. The house smelled like coffee and Zatarain's and whatever Mama had on the stove. In the summer, the ceiling fans ran all day and still didn't do enough. In December, we put lights on the porch railing and you could hear the brass bands warming up from St. Augustine Catholic Church 2 blocks down. That church was the center of everything for our family. The Arsenault family had been baptized at St. Augustine for 3 generations. First communions, confirmations, funerals. The pew third from the front on the left side that was ours. Had been since before I was born. Treme is the oldest African-American neighborhood in the United States. People forget that sometimes. They come to New Orleans for the French Quarter for Bourbon Street for the food. But Treme is where the culture actually lives, where it was born, where people who looked like us built something out of nothing generation after generation and kept building even when the world tried to take it apart. My father, Earl Arsenault, grew up understanding that. He worked as an electrician for 31 years, same company, same routes through the city, same thermos of coffee every morning. He was a quiet man, not cold, just quiet. The kind of man who showed love by fixing things before you noticed they were broken and never said a word about it. My mother, Paulette, was different. She taught 2nd grade at a public school in Gentilly for 26 years. She was good at her job. Patient with other people's children in a way she wasn't always patient at home. She was pretty. She knew it. She liked nice things. Nice appearances, the idea that her family looked right to the people watching. There were 2 daughters. Tracy, 5 years older than me, and me. Tracy had Mama's complexion light, warm, what the older women in our family called the Arsenault look. She had loose, soft curls that Mama would press and oil every Sunday morning before church. People stopped Mama on the street when Tracy was small and said things like, "Lord, she is just beautiful. She looks just like you." Mama would smile the smile of a woman who had been waiting her whole life for someone to say exactly that. I came out darker. I took after Daddy's side. Deep brown skin, thick 4C natural hair that had a mind of its own from the moment it grew in. I wasn't ugly. I knew that even as a child, in the quiet, certain way that children know things before they have the words for them. but nobody stopped Mama on the street because of me. When people saw Tracy, they said, "She is so beautiful." When people saw me, they said, "She is so smart." I was 7 years old the first time I understood those were not the same compliment. Nobody in my family ever said the word colorism out loud. Nobody sat me down and explained what was happening. It wasn't like that. It was slower. It was in the way Mama's voice went soft when she talked about Tracy to her sister on the phone. It was in the way she'd fix Tracy's hair for 30 minutes on Sunday morning and spend 5 minutes on mine before saying, "Just put it in a puff, baby." It was in the way relatives at family dinners would compliment Tracy first and then turn to me and ask about my grades, like that was the only interesting thing about me. I learned early to be useful. If I couldn't be the pretty one, I would be the capable one. I set the table without being asked. I helped Earl with his paperwork on weekends. I made good grades not because anyone pushed me to, but because being excellent at something felt like the only way to take up space in a room where I otherwise felt invisible. Now let me show you what I mean when I say the pattern was never spoken, but always present. The year Tracy turned 16, Mama took her to Dillard's for a prom dress. $120, pale yellow with a sweetheart neckline and a matching pair of heels. I heard Mama tell Aunt Celestine on the phone that night, "Tracy is just so beautiful, Celestine. She deserves to feel special." That same year was my 11th birthday. Mama picked up a cake from Winn-Dixie on her way home from work. White frosting, yellow cake standard bakery sheet. When I opened the box, the name on it said Zora. Not Zuri. Zora. I looked up at Mama. She looked at the cake. Then she said, "They'll fix it with a candle. Go get the candles from the drawer." She didn't call the bakery. She didn't go back. She put a candle in the shape of the number 11 in the middle of Zora and sang Happy Birthday with Daddy and Tracy, and that was that. I ate 2 pieces of that cake. It was good cake. I told myself it didn't matter that my name was wrong. I was getting good at telling myself things didn't matter. The summer I turned 13, our family drove up to East Feliciana Parish for the annual family reunion on Big Mama's land. 40, sometimes 50 people, cousins and aunts and uncles and neighbors who had become family over decades. Folding tables set up under the oak trees, red check tablecloths, gumbo on the outdoor burner. Since 6 in the morning, red beans and rice potato salad pralines wrapped in wax paper on the dessert table. Earl's old speaker, running Zydeco from a playlist he updated once a year and otherwise never changed. Tracy wore a new sundress Mama had bought her the week before, yellow eyelet cotton with white sandals. Mama walked her around to the older relatives one by one. "You remember Tracy? Look how she's grown. Isn't she just something?" Each stop another comment about her smile, her complexion, her potential. I wore a hand-me-down short set that used to be Tracy's. It fit fine. Nobody walked me around to anyone. I spent most of that afternoon in the kitchen tent carrying the heavy gumbo pot from the burner to the serving table, refilling the ice in the drink coolers, stacking dirty plates at the end of the meal, washing dishes in a plastic tub of soapy water while the music played and people laughed outside. I didn't complain. I didn't even feel particularly sorry for myself. This was just how it was. This was the shape of things. But at the very end of the afternoon, when most people had gone back to talking and the dishes were done and I was drying my hands on a paper towel, I felt someone watching me. I looked up. Big Mama was in her wooden chair under the largest oak tree, a glass of sweet tea, sweating in her hand and her eyes steady on my face. She had been watching me for a while. I could tell by the stillness in her expression she wasn't someone who looked at things casually. When Big Mama looked at you, she meant it. She tilted her head just slightly. A small motion. "Come here." I walked across the yard to her. She waited until I was close. Then she looked up at me and said, "Baby, you paying attention?" I didn't know what to say. To what Big Mama? She didn't answer right away. She looked out across the field, 60 acres stretching toward the tree line, late afternoon light turning the grass gold. Then she said quietly, like it was just for me, everything. I didn't understand her. Not that day. But I had been seen. And in a family where I had learned to take up as little space as possible, being seen, truly seen by the one person whose eyes I trusted most, felt like something I could hold on to. I didn't know it then, but that afternoon under the oak tree was the beginning of everything that would follow. Big Mama had noticed something in me that I hadn't yet noticed in myself, and she had already started preparing for the day I would need it. I graduated from Warren Easton High School on a Thursday evening in May, valedictorian, 4.0 GPA, a full half scholarship to Xavier University of Louisiana, the only HBCU in the country with a nationally ranked pre-pharmacy and science program. I had worked for that scholarship for 4 years, tutoring sessions in the library until they turned the lights off, extra credit on every assignment whether I needed it or not, 3 AP classes junior year, while working weekend shifts at the Popeyes on Canal Street to save money for college fees. The scholarship didn't cover. The ceremony was held in the school gymnasium, 300 people in folding chairs. I gave the valedictorian address 6 minutes, no notes from memory. I talked about Treme. I talked about what it meant to grow up in a neighborhood that had survived everything. When I walked back to my seat, 2 teachers were crying. Mama was in the 5th row. She came. I want to be fair about that. She came. She sat through the ceremony, but her phone was in her hand for most of it, and when the ceremony ended, she said, "You did good, baby," in the parking lot, and then told Earl she needed to stop by Walgreens on the way home. There was no dinner, no celebration. We went home. Earl made red beans from a pot he'd started that afternoon. We ate at the kitchen table. He said, "I'm proud of you, Zuri." Quietly, just to me, while Mama was in the other room. That was the whole thing. 3 weeks later, Tracy got a call back. She had submitted herself to a local casting agency 6 months before, the kind that advertises on flyers near the laundromat, the kind that mostly books local commercials and trade show appearances. She got a non-paying role in a commercial for a bakery in Metairie. 30 seconds. She would be in the background carrying a tray of baguettes, smiling at the camera. Mama bought a red velvet cake from Gambino's Bakery, the real Gambino's, not Winn-Dixie. She called Aunt Celestine, called Cousin Darnell's mother, called 2 neighbors from down the street. 6 people came over on a Tuesday night. Mama opened a bottle of sparkling wine from the back of the cabinet and said, "My baby is going to be on TV." The cake said Tracy in red script across the top. The name was spelled correctly. I sat at the end of the table and ate my slice and did not say a single word. I told myself it didn't matter. I had a scholarship. I was going to Xavier. The rest of it, the cake, the sparkling wine, the 6 people in the living room for a background role in a bakery commercial, none of it mattered. The almost was the part I should have paid more attention to. Xavier University sat in mid-city New Orleans, 15 minutes from Henriette DeLille Street, on a good day. I could have lived at home. I chose the dormitories instead, not because I wanted the college experience. I wanted the quiet. A room with a door I could close, a desk where the only sounds were the ones I made myself. The scholarship covered tuition and half of housing. I made up the rest by working 4 nights a week at Dookie Chase's restaurant on Orleans Avenue, one of the most legendary restaurants in New Orleans, a place where Dr. King had eaten, where presidents had come through, where the dining room felt like a kind of church if you paid attention. I bussed tables from 5 in the evening until close. I smelled like étouffée on the bus home. I didn't mind. During the same semester, I was working those 4 nights a week and carrying 18 credit hours and making the dean's list. For the first time, Mama called to tell me she was sending Tracy to Dallas, a 3-week modeling intensive, the kind that costs real money, a $1,800 program fee, plus airfare, plus a hotel stay near the venue. Mama said it like she was announcing good weather. "Tracy has a real chance, baby. We have to invest in her." I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "That's great, Mama." Because what else was I going to say, that I was working until midnight 4 nights a week and couldn't afford new shoes, that my scholarship had a gap I was quietly filling with every Dookie Chase's paycheck? I didn't say any of that. I learned a long time ago that saying those things out loud didn't change them. It only made me look like I was asking for something, and I had stopped asking. 3 months later, I made the dean's list again. I called home to tell Mama. She said, "That's good, baby." Then without a pause, without even a breath between sentences, "Chilly, you hear Tracy got called back for another shoot? I'm telling you she's going somewhere." I was sitting on my dormitory bed with my shoes still on, still in the blazer I'd worn to my academic awards luncheon that afternoon. I had a certificate in my hand from the Dean of Students, heavy paper embossed, seal my name printed in the center. "That's great, Mama," I said. "You sound tired. You eating enough?" "I'm fine." "Anyway, I gotta go. Tracy's calling on the other line." The call ended. I looked at the certificate. I set it face down on the desk, took off my blazer, turned off the lamp, lay back on the bed in the dark and stared at the ceiling for a while. Then I got up, turned the lamp back on, and studied for 2 more hours. That was how I handled things. Not because I was noble, not because I didn't feel the weight of it, but because being still and being productive was the only form of control I had, and I was not willing to give it up. The next significant thing happened the following spring. Tracy met Devonte Holloway at a networking event in Charlotte, North Carolina. He was 32, worked in corporate finance, drove a BMW, had a condo in a neighborhood called South Park. His family was black middle class in the way that Charlotte black middle class tends to be church-going, career-focused, proud of what they had built and careful about who they let into it. Tracy called Mama first, then Mama called me, not to tell me, to ask me something. "Baby, I want to fly to Charlotte to meet his family. This is important for Tracy. You know how these things work, first impressions matter." I knew what was coming before she finished the sentence. "How much is the ticket, Mama? Round trip New Orleans to Charlotte. 3 nights at a Hampton Inn near South Park. Ground transportation. Altogether $680. I had $412 in my checking account. I moved money from my savings. I booked the flight and the hotel online that same night. I sent Mama the confirmation numbers by text. She replied with a single heart emoji. When she came back from Charlotte 5 days later, she called to tell me about the trip. She talked for 11 minutes about Devonte's family home, about the neighborhood, about how well-mannered he was, about the restaurant they went to for dinner on Saturday night, about how lovely Charlotte was in the springtime. She did not once say thank you. She did not once say my name in connection with any of it. I held the phone and listened and said, in the right places. And "that sounds wonderful" twice, and I'm glad it went well at the end. Then I put the phone down and sat with the feeling for exactly as long as I was going to allow myself to sit with it, which was not long. I had work in the morning. Tracy and Devonte got engaged 14 months after they met. The proposal happened at a rooftop restaurant in Charlotte. Devonte got down on one knee. There was a photographer hidden nearby. The whole thing was planned down to the lighting. Tracy posted the video on Instagram within the hour. By the next morning, it had 412 likes. Mama called me at 7:15 in the morning, voice already at full volume, to tell me the news I had already seen on my phone. "Can you believe it? My baby is getting married." I said, "That's wonderful, Mama. Tell her congratulations." "You can tell her yourself. She's right here." The phone passed. Tracy's voice came on warm, triumphant, the voice of a woman who had been waiting her whole life to make exactly this announcement. "Can you believe it, Zuri? I'm happy for you, Tracy. He seems like a good man." "He is. He really is." A pause. "I need you to be a bridesmaid." I said yes. Of course I said yes. What I did not say was, "How much will this cost me?" I found out 3 weeks later when Tracy sent the bridesmaid details by group text. The dress a Zazie brand dusty rose style called Bridget. Retail price $920. Shoes nude block heel from a specific brand $140. Hair and makeup handled by a Charlotte salon. Tracy had selected $250, not optional, to be paid directly to the salon before the wedding day. And the flight round trip New Orleans to Charlotte for the wedding weekend $810 at the price I found. I did the math in the Notes app on my phone at 11:30 at night. $2,120. I had been running my own small accounting practice for 8 months by then, 2 rooms on Canal Street, one part-time assistant, a client list I was building slowly and carefully. I was not broke, but $2,120 was real money. Money I had plans for. I paid it. I didn't tell anyone how much it cost. I didn't tell anyone it was hard. I booked the flight, paid the salon deposit, ordered the dress, and put the receipt in a folder on my desktop labeled Tracy Wedding, and never opened it again. The wedding was held at a venue in Charlotte's Noda neighborhood, an old textile warehouse converted into an event space, exposed brick Edison lights hanging from the rafters, a 12-piece band that played from 7 until midnight. It was beautiful. I will say that, honestly. Devontae's family knew how to put together an event. I stood at the altar in my dusty rose dress with the other 4 bridesmaids. I held my bouquet correctly. I smiled at the right moments. I did everything I was supposed to do. During the reception, Mama gave a speech. She stood at the microphone in her navy blue mother of the bride dress, a glass of champagne in her hand, and she looked at Tracy across the room with an expression I had never seen her turn toward me in 31 years of life. Pure, uncomplicated pride. "Tracy," she said, "you have always been my shining girl. From the day you came into this world, I knew you were going to light up every room you walked into. And tonight, looking at you, I know I was right." 55 seconds. I counted because I had nothing else to do with my hands. She did not say my name once. I was standing 10 feet away in a dress I had paid $920 for, holding a bouquet of ivory ranunculus, and I did not exist in that speech. Later, at the family dinner table, Mama Earl, Aunt Celestine, 3 of Devontae's relatives, and a handful of cousins Tracy leaned back in her chair with the ease of a woman in the middle of the best night of her life, looked down the table at me and said, "Zuri, honey, you look exhausted. You're working too hard, baby." She tilted her head. "Maybe if you put down those spreadsheets and took better care of yourself, you'd find someone too." She smiled. Not mean exactly. Something worse than mean casual. Like it wasn't even a dig. Like it was just an observation. 2 of Devontae's cousins smiled politely. Mama nodded slightly into her glass. I looked at Tracy. I picked up my water. I took a slow sip. "I'm doing just fine," I said. Then I turned to Devontae's aunt on my left and asked her how long she'd lived in Charlotte. The conversation moved on. The moment passed. Tracy went back to being the bride. But I felt it. In the way you feel something when it's the latest in a very long line of the same thing, not a sharp pain anymore, just a familiar pressure behind the sternum, steady and dull like weather you've learned to dress for. 1 week after the wedding, Big Mama called. Not Mama. Big Mama herself on her cell phone, which she used only for calls she considered important. "Come see me, baby. Come to the land." I drove up to East Feliciana that Saturday alone, 80 miles on I-10, and then the old highway north through towns that got smaller and quieter the farther I went from the city. The land appeared on the left just past a rusted metal gate with a hand-painted sign that had said, "Arsenieu since before I was born." Big Mama was standing at the gate when I pulled up. Not the wheelchair that day, just her wooden cane and her posture, which had always been remarkable for a woman her age, straight and deliberate, as someone who had decided a long time ago that she was not going to diminish. She waited until I got out of the car. Then she turned and walked into the field without a word, moving slowly but with total certainty the way she moved through every space she occupied. I followed her. We walked out to the middle of the 60 acres. The grass was high from recent rain, pale gold in the afternoon light. The oak trees stood at the far boundary, old and enormous, the kind of trees that have seen several generations of a family come and go, and registered none of it as remarkable. The sky above East Feliciana in October is a particular shade of blue that I have never seen anywhere else, wide and clean and indifferent in the best way. Big Mama stopped, looked out at the field, let the silence sit between us for a long moment. Then she said, 60 acres, Zuri. Your great-great-grandfather Ezekiel Arsenault paid cash for this land in 1928, 1 year after the Great Mississippi Flood took everything from people who looked like him. You know how he did that?" "No, ma'am," I said. "He paid attention." She turned to look at me. "He saved every dollar that nobody thought he was saving. He watched and he waited, and when the moment came, he was ready. Because he had been preparing the whole time while everyone else was busy not seeing him." She held my gaze for a long moment. "You are that man's blood. I need you to know that." I didn't trust my voice, so I didn't say anything. I just nodded. Big Mama reached into the pocket of her housecoat and brought out an envelope. Brown paper sealed with red wax, pressed flat, the kind of seal you make with the bottom of a glass when you don't have a stamp. She held it out to me. "Keep this. Not now, when I'm gone. You'll know when the time is right to open it." "Big Mama don't talk like baby." Her voice was quiet, but it stopped me completely. "I am 81 years old. I know exactly what I am talking about. I have known for some time." I took the envelope. It was lighter than I expected. Whatever was inside, letter document, something else, it didn't weigh much in my hand. But standing there in the middle of 60 acres in the October light, holding something Big Mama had prepared specifically for me, I felt the weight of it in a different way entirely. I drove back to New Orleans that evening with the envelope in my glove compartment. I kept it in the top drawer of my desk on Canal Street for 3 years. Some nights I would take it out and turn it over in my hands, the brown paper, the red wax, her fingerprint pressed into the seal, and then put it back. I always told myself the same thing, not yet. Big Mama said I would know. I believed her. What I did not know was how soon the moment would come. The 3 years after Big Mama gave me that envelope were the quietest years of my adult life. Not quiet in the way of peace, quiet in the way of work. The kind of deep, sustained, unglamorous work that doesn't make for good stories at dinner parties because it's mostly just a person alone at a desk doing the same things over and over until they get better at them. I had been running Arsenault Financial Group for 8 months when I visited Big Mama in East Feliciana that October. 2 rooms on Canal Street. One part-time assistant named Brianna, who came in 3 days a week and was better at client follow-up than I was, and whom I was determined to keep. A handful of small clients, a Creole restaurant in the Marigny, a woman who ran a natural hair supply business out of her garage in Gentilly, a nonprofit that provided after-school tutoring in Central City. Nothing large, nothing impressive on paper, but mine. By the end of year 2, I had 8 clients. By year 3, 14. I added a second full-time employee. I moved Brianna to full-time and gave her a raise that she deserved and that I had been planning for 6 months. I signed a contract with a Black-owned housing nonprofit in the 9th Ward, my largest account to that point, and spent 3 weekends in a row, going through their financials from the past 4 years, finding errors nobody had caught, saving them a significant amount in back filings. They referred me to 2 other organizations. Those organizations referred me to others. I did not tell my family any of this, not because I was hiding it, because nobody asked. Mama called on the first Sunday of every month, regular as a utility bill. The calls lasted between 8 and 14 minutes. The structure was always the same. She would ask if I was eating enough. I would say yes. She would say good. And then she would spend the remaining time telling me about Tracy. January. Devante got a big promotion. They're going to Turks and Caicos for 2 weeks. Can you imagine? March. Tracy just finished redoing the kitchen. Quartz countertops, baby, white quartz, the whole thing. June. Tracy's wearing Saint Laurent now. I saw the pictures. She looks like a magazine. August. Devante bought her a new car, white BMW X7. I saw it on Instagram. I would say, "That's great, Mama," in the appropriate places and mean it less each time, and know that I meant it less and keep saying it anyway, because the alternative saying nothing, saying something true, required an energy I preferred to spend elsewhere. Earl called less frequently, but more meaningfully. He would ask about the firm. He didn't always understand the specifics of what I was describing, but he listened with genuine attention the way he listened to everything. And at the end, he would say, "You're doing it right, baby. Keep going." Those calls lasted 4 minutes on average and were worth more to me than anything else that came through my phone. Meanwhile, Tracy's Instagram was a world unto itself. I followed her the way you follow someone you grew up with, not closely, not obsessively, but with a kind of peripheral awareness. I saw what she posted. She posted often. The BMW parked in the South Park driveway, a candid shot from the driver's seat caption, "New Blessings." The kitchen renovation countertops gleaming under recessed lighting caption, "Home is where the heart is." The Turks and Caicos trip, 12 posts over 14 days, turquoise water resort, infinity pool, lobster on white plates, Devontae's arm around her shoulders in every sunset photo. Caption on the last one, "God is so good." Every post, Mama liked it within minutes, sometimes within seconds. I did not like the posts. I did not comment. I scrolled past them the way you drive past a house that used to be yours, aware of it, not slowing down. But I noticed things because noticing things is what I do. I noticed that by the end of year 2, the posting had become more frequent, not less. I noticed that people who are genuinely comfortable rarely need to document it that extensively. I noticed that the captions had a quality of insistence to them, as though she was not just sharing her life, but arguing for it, defending it, daring someone to question it. I filed that observation in the back of my mind and went back to work. The family reunion that summer was held at East Feliciana, the same as always. Big Mama had insisted on it. She was 81 by then, and moving more slowly the wheelchair, present more days than not. But her mind was as sharp as it had ever been, and her word on matters of family tradition was still in every room she entered the final one. 42 people came. Gumbo on the outdoor burner since 6 in the morning, red beans, potato salad, pralines on the dessert table, Earl's Zydeco playlist. The oak trees casting their long afternoon shadows across the folding tables, and the cousins running between them and the older relatives in lawn chairs at the edges of everything, watching the younger generation with expressions that mixed affection and mild exasperation in equal measure. It was a good day. Tracy and Devontae arrived at 2 in the afternoon. The car was the white BMW X7, freshly washed, catching the afternoon sun as it came through the gate. Tracy stepped out in a cream Saint Laurent pantsuit, not exactly family reunion attire, but nobody was going to say that out loud. Devontae shook hands and accepted plates of food with the ease of a man comfortable in any room. They looked from a distance exactly like the Instagram posts. Perfect, curated, bright. I watched them from across the yard and thought again about the frequency of the posts, the insistence of the captions. Then I went to help Earl carry a fresh pot from the burner and forgot about it. An hour later, we were all at the long table under the main oak. The food was out, the plates were full. The conversation had reached that comfortable mid-afternoon volume where multiple conversations overlap and nobody needs to be heard over all of them. Cousin Renelle, who was 73 and had no filter and never had called across the table. Tracy Devontae. "How y'all doing? Charlotte still treating you right?" Tracy set down her fork. She sat up a little straighter, and she spoke in a voice calibrated, I would swear to this, to be heard by the entire table. "We are so blessed, Auntie. God has just been so good to us. Devontae and I, we don't want for anything. We really don't." A small pause. The kind of pause a person takes when they are about to say the thing they actually came to say. "Honestly?" Her eyes moved briefly, directly, unmistakably to me. "I will never need a single thing from Zuri. Not one thing, and I mean that." She picked up her sweet tea, raised it slightly, took a sip. A few people smiled. One cousin laughed softly. Paulette nodded into her own glass with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who felt that something correct had just been said. I did not move. I did not change my expression. I reached for my fork and I took a bite of potato salad and I chewed it slowly and I swallowed. At the far end of the yard in her wheelchair under the largest oak tree, Big Mama was not smiling. She was looking at me, steady, patient, with the expression of a woman who had seen exactly what she expected to see and had a long time ago already done something about it. 6 months later, on a Tuesday morning in October, she was gone. The hospice nurse called me at 6:17 in the morning. I was already awake. I had been awake since 5 the way I often was in the weeks when Big Mama was declining some part of me listening, even in sleep, waiting for the call that would mean the thing I was not ready for had happened anyway. I drove to East Feliciana alone. I parked by the gate. I walked out to the middle of the field and stood there in the early morning cold and looked at the 60 acres and the oak trees and the sky coming light over the tree line, and I let myself feel it, all of it. The grief and the gratitude and the particular ache of losing the one person who had ever looked at you and seen the whole thing for exactly as long as I needed to. Then I got back in my car. There was a lot to arrange, and I was the one who was going to arrange it. The funeral was on a Saturday. St. Augustine Catholic Church, Tremé, the oldest African-American Catholic church in the United States, on the corner of St. Claude and Governor Nichols, a building that had stood through storms and floods and a century of everything this city had asked its people to absorb. 200 people came. The pews filled from the front. People stood along the back wall. Some stood outside and listened through the open doors. I had arranged all of it. Not because anyone asked me to, because in the week between Big Mama's passing and the service, it became clear within the first 24 hours that if I did not do it, it would not be done, or it would be done badly, which for a woman like Odette Marie Arsenault amounted to the same thing. I called Joseph Glapian Funeral Home on Washington Avenue the oldest Black-owned funeral home in New Orleans, the one Big Mama had mentioned once years ago in passing, the way she mentioned things she considered already decided. I met with them the next morning. I chose the casket. I approved the preparation details. I handled the paperwork. I called the choir director at St. Augustine and requested they sing "His Eye is on the Sparrow." Big Mama's song, the one she hummed in the kitchen, the one she requested at every funeral she attended for 60 years, because she said it was the only hymn that told the truth about what it meant to be a small thing in a large world and still be known by name. I wrote the obituary. I found the photograph Big Mama at 35 standing in front of Xavier University in a belted dress and low heels, chin up looking at the camera like she had just won an argument. I had it printed on the program ivory cardstock, her name in gold lettering across the top. I coordinated the repast at the church hall. Red beans, potato salad, fried chicken, sweet potato pie from a woman in Big Mama's church circle, who had been making it for 50 years and who cried the entire time she was preparing it. I arranged the chairs set, the tables, put out the flowers. At no point during that week did Tracy ask what needed to be done. She called once the evening after Big Mama passed to say she was booking her flight. I said, "Okay." She said, "Is there anything you need?" I said, "I've got it handled." She said, "Okay." And that was the end of the conversation. She arrived the day before the funeral. She came through the church doors in a black Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress and heels that were not appropriate for the uneven stone floor of a 19th century church, but which photographed beautifully. I know this because Devante took several photos of her in the doorway before they found their seats. During the service, Tracy cried loudly. I want to be precise about this because precision matters. There is the crying that comes from grief, private, involuntary, the kind that doesn't care whether anyone is watching. And there is the crying that comes from being seen to cry, performed not out of cruelty, but out of a lifelong habit of understanding that emotion, like everything else is something that can be used to occupy a room. Tracy's crying was the second kind. It filled the church. Mama sat beside her with one arm around her shoulders and a handkerchief in the other hand, attending to Tracy's grief with the focused care of a woman with one child who needed her. I sat in the front pew on the aisle, back straight, hands folded in my lap. The choir sang, "His eye is on the sparrow," and I felt it move through me like heat, like something being loosened. And I did not cry because if I started, I would not be able to stop. And there were still 4 hours of arrangements left in this day, and I needed to stay functional. Earl sat beside me. He found my hand once during the singing and held it for a moment without saying anything. That was enough. After the service, after the repast, after the 200 people had eaten and talked and remembered and slowly made their way out into the late afternoon, the family went to Big Mama's house in East Feliciana. There were 12 of us in the front room: Mama Earl, Tracy, Devonte, Aunt Celestine, 3 cousins, and a handful of others. The house smelled like Big Mama coffee and cedar, and something floral. I had never been able to identify something she had probably used for 60 years, and that would disappear now that she was gone. Mama stood up. She had the particular energy of a woman who had been waiting for a specific conversation to become appropriate, and had decided the appropriate moment had arrived. "Now," she said, "about Big Mama's land. We need to figure out what happens going forward. Tracy, since you're the eldest, I think it makes sense for you to—" There was a knock at the door. The room went quiet. I stood up before anyone else moved. I walked to the front door and opened it. Mr. Gerald Thoreau, 60 years old, navy suit, silver tie, leather briefcase, the color of tobacco. He had driven from his office in Baton Rouge 3 hours round trip because Big Mama had asked him to be present at this specific moment at this specific house on the day after her funeral service. He had agreed to this 3 years ago when she first retained him to prepare the documents. "Miss Arsenault," he said to me, "I'm sorry for your loss. She was a remarkable woman." "She was," I said. "Come in." He stepped into the front room. 12 people looked at him. The air in the room changed in the way that air changes when something official and irreversible enters it. I reached into my bag. I took out the brown envelope, read wax seal, Big Mama's fingerprint, pressed into it, 3 years in my desk drawer on Canal Street. I set it on the table in front of Mr. Thoreau. He opened his briefcase. He removed a notarized document in a manila folder. He looked around the room once briefly with the professional neutrality of a man who had done this many times and knew exactly what was about to happen, even when the people in the room did not. Then he began to read. The last will and testament of Odette Marie Arsenault, notarized July 9, 2019, in full cognitive health as certified by Dr. Elaine Broussard of Baton Rouge General Medical Center. I watched the room as he read. I watched Mama's hands tighten in her lap. I watched Tracy lean slightly forward. I watched Earl look at the floor. To my granddaughter, Zuri Camille Arsenault, I leave the entirety of the Arsenault family land in East Feliciana Parish, all 60 acres. The deed, the mineral rights, and the legacy of Ezekiel Arsenault to be held, managed, and stewarded as she sees fit. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Mama's voice came out thin and high, like something under pressure. This can't be right. Tracy. She was sick. Toward the end, she wasn't. She couldn't have been thinking clearly when Mr. Thoreau did not raise his voice. He did not shift in his chair. He said, with the patience of a man who had anticipated this response, precisely, Miss Odette was in full cognitive health when this document was notarized. That is 4 years before her passing. Dr. Broussard's certification is attached as Exhibit A. The document is legally sound and has been filed with the East Feliciana Parish Clerk of Court. Tracy turned to me. Her voice dropped. Zuri, you had to have said something to her. You had to have. She wouldn't have done this unless you... I looked at my sister. I did not feel triumph. I want to be honest about that. I did not feel the satisfaction I might have expected standing in that room holding the deed to 60 acres, while my sister's face rearranged itself around something she had not prepared for. What I felt was quieter than that, heavier. The specific gravity of a thing that has been true for a long time finally being said out loud. I looked at Tracy and I said nothing, because Big Mama had not left me 60 acres as a response to anything Tracy had done. She had left them to me because I was the one who had been paying attention, because I was the one who drove to Baton Rouge twice a month, because I was the one who called at 3 in the morning when the nurse had questions, because I was Ezekiel Arsenault's blood, and Big Mama had known it since I was 13 years old, standing in a field with dish soap on my hands. This was not about Tracy. This had never been about Tracy. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat alone in Big Mama's kitchen with a kerosene lamp and the letter from the envelope 3 pages Palmer, method cursive blue ink, and I read every word. The last line of the last page said, "You have been paying attention, baby. I always knew you would. Now let the land speak for itself." I folded the letter carefully along its original creases, put it back in the envelope, held it in both hands for a moment, and for the first time since 6:17 in the morning 6 days ago, I cried. Not for long, just enough. The kind of crying that is not grief exactly, but release the letting go of something you have been holding so tightly for so many years that your hands have forgotten what it feels like to be open. When I was done, I washed my face at Big Mama's kitchen sink, dried my hands on her dish towel blue checks worn soft from decades of use. Then I drove back to New Orleans. I had a client meeting at 8 in the morning, and for the first time in my life, I drove that highway south, feeling like I was going somewhere rather than leaving something behind. I gave myself the month of October to feel it fully, not to fall apart, not to stop functioning, but to stop pushing to let the grief be exactly as large as it needed to be, without trying to manage it into something smaller and more convenient. I kept my client appointments, I answered emails, I showed up, but I did not chase. I did not add. I went home each evening to my apartment on Esplanade Avenue and sat on the second-floor balcony with whatever was left of the day and let the neighborhood come in the trumpet player 3 blocks over, working through the same Coltrane passage every evening until he got it right. The smell of red beans from someone's kitchen below the streetcar grinding its slow arc around the corner on St. Claude. November came, and I went back to work. Not the maintenance mode of October, the real thing, forward-leaning, early morning, last one to leave work. The difference was that something had cleared. For years, I had been spending a portion of my energy that I had not fully accounted for a quiet, continuous drain that came from absorbing the Sunday phone calls and the comparisons and the particular exhaustion of existing in a family that had decided what you were worth before you had a chance to demonstrate otherwise. That energy was available now, all of it. I put it to use. The first new client came in November, a Black-owned insurance brokerage in Metairie referred by the 9th Ward nonprofit. The second came in December, a catering company in Tremé that had been operating for 11 years without a proper accounting system. The owner was a woman named Mrs. Yvonne Batiste, 62 years old. She had built her business from a folding table at a church fair into a full-service operation with 6 employees and a client list that included 3 universities and a hotel group. She had been doing her own bookkeeping in a spiral notebook. I spent the first month reconstructing 4 years of records. When I presented the findings, she looked at the report for a long moment and then looked up at me and said, "Where have you been?" I said, "I'm here now." She referred me to 2 other business owners before the end of the quarter. Those 2 referred me to others. By spring, Arsenault Financial Group had 14 active clients, 5 full-time employees, and a waiting list, the first waiting list in the firm's history. I moved into a larger suite on Canal Street. 3 offices, a small conference room, a reception area, where Brianna put a ficus tree. She named Gerald, after a client who had once brought us a fruit basket and then disputed his invoice. Gerald the ficus thrived. Gerald the client did not return. On the wall of my personal office directly across from my desk, I hung the photograph from Big Mama's obituary program. Her at 35 in front of Xavier University, belted dress, low heels, chin lifted, looking at the camera like she had already settled every question worth settling. I looked at that photograph every morning when I sat down and every evening when I stood up to leave. Not for motivation, for orientation. the way sailors used to navigate by fixed stars, something true and unchanging, while everything else moved. Now, the land. The legal transfer of the deed took 4 months parish filings, title searches, mineral rights documentation, the specific patience that Louisiana property law requires. I was not frustrated by it. I had learned from Big Mama that some things take the time they take, and the productive response is to keep doing the other work while you wait. When the deed was officially in my name, I drove to East Feliciana alone and stood in the field for an hour. No calls, no agenda, just the 60 acres and the October light coming in low and gold across the grass, the oak trees at the far boundary, casting their long shadows east the sky, that particular wide blue that belongs to that parish and nowhere else. I thought about Ezekiel Arsenault, 1928, a black man buying land in the American South with cash 1 year after a flood that had taken everything from people who looked like him in a country that had spent generations telling him he had no right to own anything. I thought about what it cost him, not just the money, but the years of accumulation before it, the discipline of saving what nobody thought he was saving, the patience of a man who understood that preparation is its own form of power. Pay attention, save what nobody sees, be ready when the moment comes. Big Mama had not just given me land, she had given me a way of moving through the world. I called Kendrick Mouton that week. He was a developer out of Baton Rouge Black-owned firm, 12 years operating 3 completed affordable housing projects in East Baton Rouge Parish. We had met the previous year at a Black Business Association luncheon, and I had filed him away the way I filed away useful things, precisely retrievably, without urgency, until urgency arrived. We walked the 60 acres together on a Saturday morning in April. He asked good questions. He listened to the answers without trying to redirect them toward conclusions he had already reached. When we got back to the gate, he leaned against the hood of his truck and looked at me. "You already had all of this figured out before I got here," he said. "I've had some time to think." "Who did the financial modeling?" "I did." He nodded once slowly, the nod of a man recalibrating an assumption. "All right then, let's build something." The plan was specific. 10 acres, the original Arsenault family land, including the 2 oldest oak trees held in permanent trust, no development, no leasing, untouchable. 20 acres leased to a cooperative of black farmers from Iberville Parish for organic agriculture. The remaining 30 acres developed in partnership with Kendrick's firm into mixed-use affordable housing, a small commercial strip, a community green space anchored by the tree line along the eastern boundary. Permitting began that summer. It moved slowly, as permitting always does, through municipal reviews and environmental assessments and parish approvals. I was not impatient. I had learned that the work worth doing rarely moves at the speed you want it to, and that the only productive response is to keep everything else moving in the meantime. So I kept everything else moving. The farming cooperative signed their lease in February. 6 black farmers from Iberville Parish, sweet potatoes, collard greens, sorghum on soil that had not been commercially farmed in 4 decades. They sent me photographs sometimes. Rows of plants coming in morning light on the field, the particular deep green of collard leaves after rain. I kept them in a folder on my phone. I looked at them on days when the work felt abstract, when the quarterly reports and the client filings and the permitting correspondence had piled into something that looked more like paperwork than purpose. Then I would look at those photographs and remember what the paperwork was for. Mama still called on the first Sunday of every month. The calls were shorter now, 8 minutes on average, down from 12. She asked about the firm. She asked about the land. The particular warmth her voice used to carry when the subject of Tracy came up had been replaced by something more neutral, more careful, like a woman who had revised an opinion she had held for a long time and had not yet decided what to replace it with. I answered her questions. I asked about Earl. I kept the calls to what they needed to be and ended them without guilt when they reached their natural conclusion. I did not know then that within a few months everything I had been watching quietly from a distance was about to arrive at my door directly. Not through Mama, not through Darnell, not through Instagram. Through a law firm in Charlotte, North Carolina, on a Tuesday morning at 10:15. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 10:15. I was at my desk reviewing a quarterly report for the catering company Mrs. Batiste's end-of-year numbers, which were the best she had posted in 11 years of operation. The office was quiet. Brianna was in the front room on a client call. Camille was at her desk going through the Metairie insurance brokerage files with the focused silence of someone who does not need background noise to concentrate. Gerald the ficus was catching the morning light from the window. Everything was as it should be. My phone lit up on the corner of the desk, Charlotte, North Carolina area code, a number I didn't recognize, a law firm name on the display, Patterson and Green. I looked at it for 2 full rings. Then I picked up. Miss Arsenault. A man's voice. Professional measured the careful neutrality of someone trained to deliver difficult information to people who did not ask to receive it. My name is Robert Green. I'm a partner at Patterson and Green in Charlotte. I'm calling on behalf of your sister Tracy Holloway. We represent her in a financial matter. We were hoping to discuss some options regarding family assistance. He used the word urgent within the first 40 seconds. He used it again at the 1-minute mark. The third time, it came at the end of a sentence about timelines that I did not fully follow because I had stopped processing the specifics and started processing the fact of the call itself. I said, "Thank you for reaching out, Mr. Green. I'll be in touch." I ended the call. I sat for a moment with my hands flat on the desk. Then I picked up my phone and called Darnell. He answered on the first ring the way Darnell always answered, as though he had been expecting the call and was mildly relieved it had finally come. "I figured you'd call," he said. "Tell me what you know." He told me. Devontae had been approached 2 years earlier by a former colleague about a logistics startup, a last-mile delivery company positioning itself to compete in a market that had been expanding rapidly. The pitch was credible. The projections were optimistic in the way that projections for startups always are, which is to say they were substantially disconnected from what the business was actually capable of producing. Devontae had invested heavily. Then, when the first round of returns did not materialize, he had invested more the specific financial error of someone who is more committed to being right than to being solvent. He had used the South Park house as collateral for a loan to fund the second investment. The startup had collapsed 8 months later. The house was now in foreclosure proceedings. The credit card debt accumulated over 2 years of maintaining the lifestyle, while the investment capital evaporated was $280,000 across 4 cards. Devontae and Tracy were currently renting a 2-bedroom apartment in a Charlotte neighborhood called Plaza Midwood. The BMW was gone. Devontae had taken a significant pay cut at a new firm that had agreed to hire him after his previous employer had quietly and without public statement moved him out. "It's bad, 'cause," Darnell said. "Real bad. Everybody knows. That's why it's on Facebook." I thanked him. I ended the call. I sat with this information the way you sit with something heavy, not fighting it, just letting it rest in your hands while you figure out what you're going to do with it. $280,000 in credit card debt, a foreclosed house, a man who had bet everything on being the kind of success that looked a certain way from the outside and had lost, a woman who had built her identity so thoroughly around the image of that success that its collapse had left her with nothing to stand on. I thought about the Instagram posts, the BMW, the white quartz countertops, the Turks and Caicos sunsets with the caption that said, "God is so good." I thought about the family reunion, the Saint Laurent pantsuit, the raised glass of sweet tea, the voice calibrated to carry across the table. I will never need a single thing from Zuri, not one thing. And I mean that. I did not feel satisfaction. I want to be precise about that because satisfaction would have been simple and what I felt was not simple. It was something more layered, the particular weight of watching a thing you predicted come true without any pleasure in having been right, because the cost of being right was a sister who had lost everything she thought defined her and a family that was now going to look to me to solve it. 20 minutes after I ended the call with Darnell, Mama called. I looked at the display, breathed once, answered. Zuri. Her voice had the particular quality it got when she was managing something controlled, purposeful, already 3 moves ahead of the conversation. I need to talk to you about Tracy. I know, Mama. A pause. She had expected to deliver news. You already heard. Yes. Then you understand that she needs help right now. She is your sister. She is your blood. Family comes first. You know, that's how Big Mama raised us. The invocation of Big Mama was deliberate. I noted it without reacting to it. So I need to know that you're going to do the right thing here. I said, I hear you, Mama. So you'll help her. I said, I hear you, Mama. A longer silence this time. The kind that happens when someone realizes the conversation is not going the direction they planned and has not yet decided how to redirect it. Zuri. I'll be in touch, Mama. Tell Earl I said hello. I ended the call. Then I did something I had not done in some time. I opened the top drawer of my desk. I took out the letter, 3 pages, Palmer Method cursive blue ink, the envelope still bearing the impression of the red wax seal I had broken at Big Mama's kitchen table 18 months ago. I unfolded it carefully along the original creases. I turned to the second page, midway down in Big Mama's steady, unhurried hand. When they come asking, and they will come asking, baby, they always do remember this. You do not owe anyone a rescue from consequences they chose while laughing at you. You only owe yourself the peace you worked for. That peace is worth more than any amount of money you could give away trying to buy their love back. Love that requires you to bleed for it was never love to begin with. It was a transaction, and you were always the one paying. I read it twice. Then I folded the letter back along its creases, put it in the envelope, and set it on the corner of my desk where I could see it. I looked out the window at Canal Street. A streetcar went past. A woman walked by with a coffee cup and a dog on a leash. 2 men in hard hats stood at the corner reading something on a clipboard. The ordinary Tuesday morning machinery of a city going about its business, indifferent to the fact that my sister's carefully constructed life had just come apart in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that the people who had spent 31 years not paying attention to me were now paying very close attention. I thought about the 11 minutes. That was how long I sat with the lawyer's number still on my recent calls screen before I made my decision. I know because I watched the clock on the wall, the small analog one above the door that I had bought at a secondhand shop on Magazine Street, and that kept slightly imperfect time running about 3 minutes fast, which I had always found oddly comforting. I watched the minute hand move. I thought about Big Mama in the field. I thought about Ezekiel Arsenault and the cash and the land and the year after the flood. I thought about a 13-year-old girl carrying a heavy pot of gumbo from a burner to a table while her sister got walked around the yard in a yellow sundress. I thought about what it meant to have been the one nobody watched. And I thought about what it meant that the one person who had watched everything for 81 years with those steady, unhurried eyes, had already written down exactly what I needed to hear before I knew I was going to need it. 11 minutes. Then I picked up my phone, not to call the lawyer, not to call Mama back. I called Tracy. Tracy answered after 3 rings. I had not spoken to her directly since the night after Big Mama's funeral 18 months ago, in that front room in East Feliciana, when Mr. Thoreau had read the will, and Tracy had looked at me across the table and said I had to have done something to earn what Big Mama left me. We had not called each other since. We had not texted. The silence between us had been mutual and unspoken, the kind that forms when 2 people both understand that the conversation that needs to happen is too large for either of them to start. Her voice when she answered was different from any version of it I had heard before. Not the bright, carrying voice of the family reunion, not the warm, triumphant voice of the engagement announcement, not even the flat, managed voice of the funeral. This was smaller, careful, the voice of someone who had been rehearsing how to sound normal and was not entirely succeeding. Zuri. Hey, Tracy. A pause. She was waiting to see which direction I was coming from. I guess you heard, she said. I heard. Another pause. Then she began to talk. She told me about the investment, Devontae's certainty about it, the projections that had looked so solid the way the first warning signs had appeared, gradually enough that it was easy to believe each one was temporary. She talked about the months of maintaining appearances while the finances deteriorated, the credit cards that started as a bridge and became a flood, the morning the bank called about the house, and the specific quality of silence that had existed between her and Devontae in the 24 hours that followed. I listened without interrupting. I let her finish. When she was done, I said quietly, "Do you remember what you said at the family reunion last summer?" A silence, different from the pauses before this one had texture. Resistance. "Zuri, this isn't Tracy." I kept my voice level, not cold, just steady. "Do you remember?" The silence stretched. Outside my office window, a brass band was warming up somewhere on Canal Street, the tuba finding its low note, the trumpet answering it. New Orleans sounds like this sometimes, like the city itself is clearing its throat. "Yes," Tracy said finally, quietly. "I remember. Say it." Another silence. Longer. "I said I would never need anything from you." In front of 40 people. "Yes." After I paid for Mama's flight to Charlotte. After I covered 9 months of Big Mama's medical bills. After I drove to Baton Rouge twice a month for a year. I was not raising my voice. I did not need to. I need you to hold all of that at the same time right now, not to punish you, because I need you to understand what I'm about to say. I heard her breathing, uneven. She was holding herself together with effort. Then I heard another sound, a chair shifting, a throat clearing. Mama's voice in the background, low and urgent, the sound of a woman whispering instructions to someone who is losing an argument. "Zuri!" Mama had taken the phone. "I don't know what is wrong with you today. Your sister is going through the worst time of her life, and you are sitting there making her feel worse. That is not how Big Mama raised us. That is not what family does." I took a breath. "Mama, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it honestly." She said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. "Do you remember who paid for your flight to Charlotte 7 years ago? To meet Devontae's family, Silence. Do you remember who paid Big Mama's hospice nurse, who sat in the waiting room at Baton Rouge General while Big Mama had her cardiac workup in year 2 of her decline? Who called the funeral home? Who wrote the obituary, who arranged for the choir to sing, 'His Eye is on the Sparrow,' because it was the only hymn Big Mama ever requested at anyone's funeral for 60 years. Zuri, that's not the point. I'm not saying it to keep score, Mama. I'm saying it because you just told me Big Mama would not want this, and I need you to think very carefully about what Big Mama actually saw, what she actually knew, and why she did what she did." A long silence, the kind that happens when someone's argument runs up against a truth they cannot dismiss and has not yet found a way around. Then quietly from further away, Tracy had taken the phone back. "Big Mama would be ashamed of you right now." I had expected this, not the exact words, but the shape of them. The last resort of someone who has no remaining ground to stand on, invoking the person who is gone as a weapon, putting words in the mouth of someone who cannot correct them. I reached for the letter on the corner of my desk. "I'm going to read you something," I said, "from Big Mama's letter, the one she left me." I heard Tracy's breathing stop for a moment. I unfolded the second page, found the paragraph. Read it slowly and clearly the way Big Mama would have spoken it if she were in the room, without drama, without performance, with the plain authority of someone who had lived long enough to know the difference between what sounded true and what was. When they come asking, and they will come asking, baby, they always do remember this: you do not owe anyone a rescue from consequences they chose while laughing at you. You only owe yourself the peace you worked for. That peace is worth more than any amount of money you could give away trying to buy their love back. Love that requires you to bleed for, it was never love to begin with. It was a transaction, and you were always the one paying. I folded the page. From the other end of the line, nothing. Not Tracy, not Mama, not the sound of the Charlotte apartment or the whispered coaching or the managed breathing of two women trying to hold a negotiation together. Just silence. And in that silence, I felt something I had not felt in 31 years of being the quiet one, the capable one, the one who paid and arranged and drove and called and never asked for recognition. I felt the specific peace of someone who has said the true thing and does not need the other person to acknowledge it for it to remain true. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I spoke. I'm not going to help with the debt. That's my answer, and it's not going to change. Tracy's voice came back, thin. Zuri, but I'm going to send you 2 numbers. One is the Louisiana Asset Building Coalition. They do free financial counseling for people rebuilding after hardship. I used them when I was starting the firm, and they are real, and they helped me. The other is a network of Black women business owners in Charlotte that helps people start over after financial setbacks. Both of these are organizations where people will treat you with dignity and help you build something real. I paused. I hope you use them, Tracy. I mean that genuinely. A sound from Tracy's end. Not words. Something smaller, the sound of a person absorbing something they did not expect to receive from the direction it came from. Then quietly, tight with something I could not fully name, Big Mama left you everything, and you're sending me a phone number. Big Mama left me 60 acres of family land that Ezekiel Arsenault bought with cash in 1928 because he paid attention and saved what nobody thought he was saving and was ready when the moment came. I kept my voice even. She didn't leave it to me to use as a rescue fund for people who publicly declared they would never need me. She left it to me to steward, and that's what I'm doing. One more silence. Then I said, and I meant every word of it, I hope things get better for you, Tracy. I really do. Take care of yourself. I ended the call. I opened my text messages. I typed out the 2 resource numbers carefully, the coalition, the network, and sent them to Tracy's number without a message attached. Just the numbers. Let them speak for themselves. Then I set the phone face down on my desk. The brass band on Canal Street had found its full sound by now. Trumpet and trombone and the steady thump of the bass drum, the particular New Orleans second-line rhythm that sounds like celebration and like grief at the same time. Because in this city, those 2 things have always lived in the same breath. I sat and listened to it for a minute. Then I picked up Mrs. Batiste's quarterly report and went back to work. For the first time in my 31 years, I hung up a call involving my family and felt nothing chase me afterward. No guilt circling the room. No second-guessing settling over the afternoon. No quiet voice asking whether I had been too hard, too cold, too much of the thing they always said I was. Just stillness. The deep earned stillness of a woman who finally knew, not thought, not hoped, but knew exactly what she was worth, and had stopped waiting for anyone else to tell her. That was 7 months ago. Here is what my life looks like now. I wake up at 5:45 most mornings, not because an alarm forces me to, because my body has learned the rhythm of a life that has things worth getting up for. I make coffee in the French press. Big Mama gave me years ago. Heavy ceramic cream colored a small chip on the handle from a move I made in my 20s that I never had repaired because it felt dishonest to smooth over something that had already happened. I take it out to the balcony on Esplanade Avenue. I watch the neighborhood come awake. The sky over Treme goes from black to deep blue, to the particular pale gold that belongs only to New Orleans mornings. The light that makes even the ordinary things, the power lines, the live oaks, the shotgun houses in their peeling paint, look like they were put there on purpose. I think about Big Mama most mornings, not with the sharp grief of the first year, with something quieter, gratitude that has had time to settle into its permanent shape. Arsenault Financial Group now has 5 full-time employees and 17 active clients. We are on track to close the year at just over $300,000 in revenue. I do not say that to perform success. I say it because Big Mama told me to pay attention, and paying attention means being honest about what is real, including what is good. The land project is moving. Kendrick Mouton and I broke ground at East Feliciana in March. The organic farming cooperative has been operating on the leased 20 acres since February 6. Black farmers from Iberville Parish growing sweet potatoes and collard greens and sorghum on soil that has not been commercially farmed in 40 years. They send me photographs sometimes. The rows of plants coming in the morning light on the field, the particular deep green of collard leaves after rain. I keep them in a folder on my phone. I look at them when I need to remember what it means for land to be used with intention. The 10 family acres are untouched. The 2 oldest oak trees, the ones Big Mama sat beneath at every family reunion, have been incorporated into the community green space design as a permanent feature. They will remain. Whatever else changes around them, they will remain. I go to St. Augustine, most Sundays, 3rd pew from the front on the left side, the same pew. I sit where Big Mama sat, and I listen to the choir, and I let the music do what music in that building has always done, reach into the places where words don't go and rearrange something. My relationship with Mama is what it is. We have dinner 4 times a year. Always at a restaurant, never at the house, which is a boundary I established without announcing it as a boundary, simply by being the one who makes the reservation and always making it somewhere neutral. Mama is 60 now. She moves more carefully than she used to. She asks about the firm. She asks about the land. She does not ask about Tracy in front of me anymore. I don't know whether that is consideration or avoidance, and I have made peace with not needing to know. At our last dinner, she looked at me across the table for a long moment and said, "You turned out different than I expected." I said, "Different how?" She thought about it. "Stronger," she said finally, "than I gave you credit for." It was not an apology. I did not need it to be. It was an acknowledgement, small, imperfect, arriving 20 years late, and I received it for what it was rather than what it wasn't. And then I picked up my menu and asked her if she wanted to split the bread pudding for dessert. Earl calls on Thursdays. We talk for 8 or 9 minutes about real things. He is thinking about retiring next year. He wants to drive up to East Feliciana and see the project. I told him I would take him in the spring when the farming cooperative has the first harvest in. He said, "That sounds real good, baby." I could hear him smiling. Tracy moved back to New Orleans 6 months ago. She and Devontae separated quietly without public announcement the way their decline had been happening for 2 years before anyone said it out loud. She is renting an apartment in Mid-City. She found work at a salon in Uptown. Darnell keeps me updated the way Darnell keeps everyone updated briefly, factually, without editorializing. I have not called her. She has not called me. We saw each other once 3 months ago at Rouse's Market on Magazine Street. I came around the end of an aisle with a basket, and she was standing at the checkout, a small grocery bag already in her hand, moving to leave. We both stopped. The kind of stop that happens before the mind has decided anything, pure instinct, the body recognizing someone it grew up with. We looked at each other. She looked tired, not broken. Tired the way people look when they have been doing hard work for a sustained period of time and are not yet on the other side of it, but are still moving. I recognized that look. I had worn it for years. She nodded. Small, careful. I nodded back. Then she walked out, and I put my basket on the belt, and the cashier asked if I had my loyalty card, and I found it in my wallet, and life continued in the ordinary way that life continues after significant moments, without pause, without ceremony, without any acknowledgement that something real had just happened between 2 people in the bread aisle of a grocery store on a Thursday afternoon. I do not hate my sister. I want to be clear about that. I do not hate her, and I do not wish her harm, and I do not spend time hoping that things stay hard for her. I genuinely sent those resource numbers. I genuinely hope she uses them. I hope she finds her way to something real, not the performed version of a life that looks successful from the outside, but the actual thing. The thing you build in the quiet without applause when nobody is watching. I know something about that. There is a field in East Feliciana Parish, Louisiana, 60 acres, oak trees older than anyone in my family can remember, soil that has held rain and heat and grief and everything in between for nearly 100 years. Last Saturday, I drove up alone. No agenda. I parked at the gate and walked out to the middle of the field and stood there in the morning before the heat came in, the way I have done a handful of times since Big Mama passed, and will probably keep doing for the rest of my life. I thought about Ezekiel Arsenault. I thought about Big Mama at 35 in front of Xavier University, chin up, already decided. I thought about a girl of 13 with dish soap on her hands being asked if she was paying attention. I am paying attention, Big Mama. I always was. Family is built, not born. And sometimes the person who loves you most quietly, without announcements, without applause, is already preparing you for the moment you will need to stand alone and stand firm. Big Mama knew. She paid attention, and she taught me that I was worth paying attention to. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to set a boundary with family? How did it change your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, check out the video in the description. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it.